This is Linda of Christ is King Forever. I just wanted to quickly comment on a few things. First of all, spiritual realities that nobody really likes to acknowledge because it might mean that we have to take responsibility for what casts spells upon us, takes our attention, and stuff like this, and about reverse engineering of the Holy Spirit, what the Holy Spirit's doing when it gives you and grants you the holiness, the grace, the forgiveness, and it pours into you. All of a sudden, the darkness in you starts to dilute and things become clear, and then you're able to extend outward, which is true. You could see this in the Maslow hierarchy of needs. Basically, your basic needs have to be met first before you're able to extend outward. And if you're broken and hurt, how are you ever going to extend outward? Just like there's a certain type of pottery that they, instead of, if if you have plates that break, usually we just throw them away. In places like Japan, they have a special type of pottery that they fill with gold, and then it looks really beautiful. But it's also filled with something that will contain the vessel. But the more broken the vessel, the more beautiful it is. And the Holy Spirit is like this. It fills in these parts of us that, when life is hard, we're able to extend outward when we really don't have it ourselves. The Holy Spirit offers what we don't have. So it's a type of reverse engineering. That's why we can rest in the grace of Jesus Christ, because he pours into us things that we didn't have to toil for. Because there's all this, everything you have to work really hard for. But with Jesus, he grants you all the grace and mercy that you need in order to find it within yourself when you really don't think you have it. It's just there all of a sudden. It's just like, the reason why I'm mentioning this is because of this statement above. Um, there's this beautiful an oath between the Jewish people and God, but they are just a lot, they just remind me a lot of Apostle Paul. I just see this really cool parallel. Like, I was listening to Shapiro's book, like the first two chapters, because I haven't bought it yet. And basically, he says this very thing right here, but he doesn't have the Holy Spirit. And he's seeing it in a very, he's like thinking about it in a worldly way, not in a very like spiritual way. But he sees there's something happening. He sees a spell being cast. He sees a spirit rising up, and like a Goliath, looking right at the Jewish people again. And it's risen up time and time and time and time again. And there's a certain type of conquering that's happening that I've spoke of in my videos many a times, that doesn't need a gun, it doesn't need a knife, it doesn't need anything. It's just conquering the hearts of man. It has to do with pride. It has to do with envy. It has to do with hatred. It has to do with needing to look around and say, well, why don't I have what everybody else has, type of thing, which is, I think, something he's addressing. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. I read it a few days ago, or listened to it a few days ago. But I thought this was an interesting thing because they're kind of, it's its own type of reverse engineering for Jewish folks, because I'm hoping that they're seeing with their eyes in this reality that there's definitely a spiritual realm, and it's definitely, casting shadows. And these shadows have real consequences for groups of people, especially the Jewish folks. And that's the real battle. The real battlefield happens to be spiritual. And but it happens to be starting in us first. So we can have the appearance of holiness on the outside, of being religious on the outside. But if you don't really actually have those words embossed or engraved upon your heart, and it actually translates into action and obedience and oaths being kept, then all the words are in vain. You could pray 1,000,000 times every day for 1,000,000 days, and it means nothing if it doesn't translate into doing the right thing and being obedient. And the fact that there's the reverse engineering, meaning I can be my first day into knowing Jesus Christ as Lord, asking for the Holy Spirit, repenting, and then seeing the spiritual warfare and saying, in Jesus' precious name, we rebuke the enemy, we rebuke the demons that are influencing the media and the world into going against Jewish folks. It might be that it's being allowed. I don't like to think of that in that term, in that way, but if it's opening up their eyes to the spiritual side of this, that, the Holocaust wasn't that long ago. And every generation has to rise up and decide, are we going to do the right thing? And if Jesus is the truth, the way, and the life, do you really think that the Jewish people would have any chance if there was no Christianity? They would not. They would not. There would be no chance. And I'm not saying there aren't bad Christians out there who don't like them. I get it. There are people who are fighting hard to make sure and to support and to protect, who are not being underneath the spell of this darkness that's anti-Jewish folks in a time when everybody's got safe spaces except them. The whole of the world says you can't be here, and now you can't even be in Israel. It's really crazy. Anyway, so to hear him say what Apostle Paul pretty much has said, and then to also see the other flip side of that coin, which is, why did Jesus conquer the world spiritually but not physically? It's always bothered me. I know it bothers everybody else, because you go, I want Jesus here. I want Jesus walking around. I want a real conquering in a real physical fashion. I want there to be physical laws, telling people what to do that we know came straight from Jesus. And it's just, we're here with all these mixed things, with Satanists making laws and atheists making laws and godless people running the government for money and whatever. It's just disheartening. But if you really do the math, and if you know that right now would be very different for Jewish folks, and the tide would have turned way faster if it weren't for Christians, I'm telling you right now, the world would be different, because there's a spiritual reality and it's holding back the wall. I do think Israel's definitely doing it, for sure. I mean, they're definitely fighting a real physical and literal spiritual battle, and on behalf of the West. But I do think the West has got a lot of weird things happening that makes it easier for these things to creep in. Things being, relative, and I can just be acknowledged and identified as whatever it is I tell you I am. Well, what kind of reality do you have at that point? I mean, and when you are so loving and accepting that you're willing to let people in who would destroy you because of your sexuality and stuff, like, people in Gaza would kill people who have certain sexual identities. None of this really makes sense. The math isn't mathing, which is a sign of serious decline, which is a sign that we're coming to a place where we have to rise up and decide, does it end here? Or should we just, or the chip's going to fall where they may, and this is the opportunity and the time frame the Jewish people have to come to Christ because it's over. I mean, this is a battle that's been, it's a cycle. It's a cycle over and over and over again. The book of Revelation speaks of that old dragon, those old demons rising up out of the water, doing the same thing they've always done, because it's real. It's you can see it. So outside of the fact that through imitation, through being forgiven and given a chance tomorrow with a new day, being underneath the mercy of Jesus, over time we're given opportunity to be better, to do better, to transcend. Whereas religious ritual just kind of keeps you in the ritual without the heart posture change. But you didn't worship hard enough or long enough, or, and so I'm hoping that those spiritual truths kind of clash in that reality that Apostle Paul speaks of in the book of Ephesians and all kinds of places. He really threads it together quite well. Even Peter said, Apostle Paul says a lot of things that are hard to understand, but what he says is true, and I agree. And I think it's because he comes from a place of being a Pharisee in a high place and a wealthy family, and he was just able to grasp what the Holy Spirit was revealing in kind of a whole way. Whereas for maybe he also was the one who had a lot to pay back for because he persecuted Christians. I have no idea. I mean, he was gifted something that was very, very special. But anyway, I'm praying that for the Jewish folks. I'm hoping that they become the Apostle Pauls of the last days. That's what I really want for them. I really want for them to see the whole truth and to feel the whole truth and to not be angry or resentful or I guess I just want the best for I guess the underlings in the sense that they are the smallest group. They only have themselves for the most part, and they're highly misunderstood. And they happen to be, right now, in my opinion, the most persecuted of the groups right now, as always, forever. And I want that to end for them. I want that cycle to end. I want us to see the spiritual war for what it is, and for them to understand that's where the reverse engineering of because of what God did. That's why I do the right thing because I'm grateful. That's where I'm coming from instead of I'm underneath the burden of God is so big. I have to pray more. I have to worship more. I have to do these things or else it's the other way around actually. But he is so big that he doesn't really need me to do any of those things, but I do those things because I love him and because he's been good to me. But this is Linda of Christ is King forever. May God be with you.